Hello, Nasdaq LinkedIn followers, and welcome to another episode of Nasdaq Spotlight. I'm your host, Lyanne Alfaro. We are coming to you from Times Square, where I'm joined by Naj Austin. She's founder and CEO of Ethels Club, a social and wellness club created for people of color. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So start by telling us a little bit more about Ethels Club, which just opened last fall.
Sure. So Ethels Club opened this past November, and we are a social and wellness club designed with people of color in mind. So what that means is that with every decision we've made as a company and all of the intentional pieces within the club center people of color.
Amazing. And this was met with very high demand.
Yes.
And I read that you were looking for a space like this and you didn't find one, so you created one.
Yes.
And people came. So what is the membership looking like now in terms of numbers, in terms of demographic, and how many people are on the wait list?
So we have over 200 members currently. We have a very, very long wait list, and we basically pull from it as needed, as long as we maintain the quality of the experience of the clubhouse. Yes, so it's been very exciting since we started.
So it's still quite an intimate, relatively, when you think about all the co-working spaces that are available, it's still an intimate space.
Yeah, and I mean, we opened in November, so it's only been about 4 months, but we've sort of intentionally kept it small so that it feels like a safe space versus a very crowded place where people can kind of come and work and come to events.
Amazing. So walk me through this space, because it's more than a co-working space, right?
Yes.
It's more than a WeWork. When someone walks in, what can they find?
So we actually run away from the word co-working and instead try to use words like community focused. So when you walk into the club, we have a public-facing boutique that centers POC artisans, designers, and makers. After that, it's the private membership club only. So we have a lounge gathering areas, we have quiet rooms, we have a stadium seating area where we have a lot of our conversation series and events. We have a wellness studio where different practitioners of color come in and meet with our members for either consultations, one-on-one sessions, etc. We also have a podcast studio where members can come and record podcasts.
Amazing. And you were very mindful when putting together even the space together, because everything in this space, from the couches to the art, is made or sourced by people of color, right?
Yes, so that was a huge undertaking, right? We had to find people who were local, who could deliver on our timeline and within our budget to create this space, and we managed to pull it off in about 3 months, which was pretty crazy in terms of getting things staffed in New York City. But the idea was that we wanted people of color who are coming into the club to feel sort of seen and celebrated within the space.
What's kind of the takeaway and the general feelings that you hope that people who are subscribing to Ethels Club are getting? Like, what are they getting from this space that they may not be able to find in other spaces?
So one of the big things that we do just by existing is that we are a space that truly considers what it means to be a person of color and all that carries as you sort of walk through your daily life. So we're not lumping people of color into one sort of sad category, but rather making a space where they're intentionally thought about. And when you think about most physical spaces that currently exist, people of color are not who their audience is. So we're saying sort of very loudly and proudly that our audience is people of color, and that we want to create a space where they can thrive and create, connect, heal, cry, celebrate, etc.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a really rare thing to have. And I thought it was very interesting because I was reading about your grandmother who actually created similar spaces, but out of her home, right?
Yes, yes.
Could you tell me a little bit more about her?
Sure. So she was a powerhouse, but she was a very sort of warm person that everyone kind of convened around. So growing up, her home was always a place where you saw, people get married and babies being born and graduations and potentially some divorces. But it was a lot going on, and it was very community focused, and everyone kind of depended on her to create that atmosphere. And so when I was building out Ethels Club, it was important for me to bring a lot of that emotion and feeling into the clubhouse, that feeling of safety, that feeling of family, that a lot of people of color are struggling to find today.
And her name was?
Ethel.
Amazing.
Yes.
Right out, named after the club.
Yes.
And so you were able to borrow some learnings from that in terms of creating your space.
Definitely.
And now, a conversation that we've been having this entire month, and beyond the month, the year, in years past, when it comes to people of color in entrepreneurship and Black people in entrepreneurship is that there is increasing amount of new business generation coming from communities of color, in particular from Black entrepreneurs and Black female entrepreneurs.
Yep.
However, one of the consistent opportunities / challenges that are presented is the access to capital and also the access to knowing the way
Sure.
in terms of entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So in your journey so far, where did you kind of start when it came to entrepreneurship and entering this space, and what are some learnings that you've had since you've begun?
So I spent the last 5 years of my life in the real estate and startup hospitality tech space. So working at a startup was something I have already done. I just was not the CEO of the company, so you're still doing a lot of the groundwork and sort of laying the basis of what the product is, but you're not necessarily the decision maker, which is a little bit harder. So I did that for 5 years and was spending a lot of time thinking about how to make spaces more inclusive, more equitable. I was personally looking for a space like Ethels Club, right? A space where I could go and be around other people of color, kind of unburden myself and feel seen. Once I started out on the journey, it was very different from everything before in regards to being the sole decision maker, being the face of the company. Raising capital was interesting. We managed to raise around over $1 million, which was amazing, and it allowed us to have our first product, but it definitely had its hiccups in terms of investors and people seeing people of color as a real audience and a real economic audience, right? People who are going to spend money on something that they care about. And my entire thesis is based around creating an ecosystem that people of color can kind of thrive within, starting with this clubhouse. But it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure you've had a lot of learnings since.
Yes.
So to other people who are getting started, because this is a field for Black women and Latino women that are getting into this entrepreneurship
Right.
space in large numbers, what are some of those learnings that you would share with them?
I think the biggest learning is to continue to believe and champion yourself, because I think it's really easy to have a lot of conversations with people who may not directly understand your product and kind of write it off or not even understand your audience. The reason that I believe Ethels Club has gotten as far as it has is because I know the problem that I'm looking to solve to be true, and I have just stuck with that. And I think that kind of belief and confidence, yes, it shows in sort of numbers, right, and revenue and in consumers, but I think a lot of it also comes from the founder of believing that this is a real problem and you're the right person to solve it. And so I think understanding how to bottle that confidence and kind of live with it every day is really important, because it's really hard to be an entrepreneur generally as a Black woman, much harder. So that would be my biggest takeaway, is to kind of stick with it and believe in yourself.
And what can we expect from the space? I know you mentioned that the physical space will be
Yes.
growing.
Yes.
What other changes will we see?
So we are expanding the current clubhouse that's located in Brooklyn right now to include a 7,000 square foot experiential performance venue, which we're really excited about. We've also recently launched a digital marketplace so that people could buy from POC artisans, designers, and makers, and that launched about a week and a half ago, and we're looking at different neighborhoods and cities for future locations.
Incredible. Well, I am looking forward to seeing all of that growth,
Yes.
and definitely the performance space is
Yes.
much needed.
It'll be fun.
Naj, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned. We'll have more updates coming to you right here from the Nasdaq page.